Numbers don't give you the meaning. Numbers give you an indication, and we are actually going to ask you what the context is that led to that number. Right?
Okay, here's data. Don't worry, we're not going to go through all these data. Actually, the reason we brought up this slide is to talk about perspectives to the data. So this is actually one of the first pages of the report you received, and it's called Uniform Group Analysis. So this is one way we look at data to filter out the number of programs that enter and leave the membership during the 5-year period. We also look at the data from all programs, all EMBA programs in the report. But we wanted to emphasize this because, as Michael mentioned this morning, we've lost some programs along the way. So when we look at the UGA, this is the same programs across the board. To give you some more context to that, approximately 195 programs completed the report this year, or completed the survey this year, and UGA represents about 138 of those, so about 70%. So, as Elmer mentioned, we're going to start with the missions, near and dear to our hearts. So a little primer. Within the survey, we look at different parts of the admissions funnel. At the very beginning, at inquiries, to the number of students who apply, those we accept, and then eventually enroll. And we also look at ratios between these segments to help give us some idea of where we are at with our admissions process. So we have application yield, which is the number of applications received divided by the number of inquiries, right? And then acceptance rate, obviously, is the number of applications we accept divided by the number of applications received. And then enrollment, how many students actually came out of those that we accepted. So again, just a little primer. And as we look at what happened this year and over the last 5 years. But first, let me just say, this is a infographic slide that we put at the section of each section of the report this year to kind of guide you some top-line data as you look at the report. So very quickly, you can see that a lot of things are up over the last 5 years, right? Inquiries, 18% over the last 5 years is an increase. The number of completed applications are up by 10%. Number of accepted applications a little bit lower, 3%. And then seats, the capacity, okay? Now, also, we want this to be interactive, so if you have questions, please ask questions. So looking at the ratios, we can see that the impact of the pandemic, right? So as we look at applicant yield, we can see it actually dipped from last year. Now, why is that? Well, when we look at ratios, we've got to remember what's on the numerator and what's on the denominator. Sometimes there's something that's driving just the numerator, sometimes it's just driving the denominator, or sometimes it's driving both. In this case, we may think, oh, applicant yield is down. Is that bad? No. Actually, what happened over the last year is the number of inquiries grew much more significantly than the number of applications. So what this is telling us is there's much more interest in our programs over the last year. So that's a good thing. When we look at acceptance rate, that's pretty steady. This is also a good sign. Over this turmoil and disruption we had, we kept selectivity high in our EMBA programs. So this is a great sign for us. Looking at enrollment yield, again, this is the number of students that enroll divided by the number of applications accepted. We can see that massive dip last year, obviously the pandemic. Good news is we're starting to see what we think is a revival. But what will be really interesting to see is what this will look like next year.
Right.
And I'm going to use this as a soapbox for just a moment. This is important where everyone completes the survey, right? So we have a better perspective of what's going on in the industry. Yes, right. What's that? Yeah, applicant yield is the number of applications received divided by the inquiries, right? So again, the inquiries grew much more, which is why we had that fall. So this is actually a good number. So again, this is a great context. Yeah.
Two questions. So we said this is a 5-year, the numbers were looking at 5 years. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, especially the inquiry numbers being up 18%. Are those the pandemic years? Is that skewing that number? Because there seems to be for a lot of schools a significant jump.
Yes. Yes, actually, the last year it grew
it's actually
even more
increased.
over the last year.
Right.
Now,
It's 60.
Randall, another good point to that is each school measures inquiries a little bit differently, right? Some are a little bit better with their CRMs measuring interest. So that is kind of a fuzzy number, but when you look at the UGA again, we're seeing the same program, so it's a true trend. Okay, great question.
Yeah.
55.
This is
Yeah.
this is not UGA, that's all.
Yeah.
No, this is not UGA, right? Okay.
Can you do it on that one?
Okay.